So the next thing that I realized we needed to do before we actually start gluing and working on stiffening up the side is to actually finish these sub-assemblies for frame 5. So what I need to do is go ahead and take these apart, scuff these, and alignite the parts. These plates that are on the side here do need to be glued into place, so they are supposed to be glued. They are supposed to be glued to these side supports here. So we'll go ahead and get these glued in and riveted into place, and then these will be ready to be installed, at least on the skin. And I need to figure out if we're going to glue these into place or just pop rivet them in. I haven't decided. I don't think you have to glue them into place. It just makes, like the manual says, a little bit more uniform look, so you don't get too much waviness if you glue this in first and then go ahead and pop rivet it afterwards. I might do that. We'll see. So let me get these cleaned up first. Let me get these all done and riveted together, and then we'll start working on the actual side assemblies. I was able to take the supports from frame 5 and get these plates glued in place, and I also was able to alignite these. So these are, for the most part, ready to go. They just need to be final riveted. The plates need to be riveted with pop rivets, and then we need to rivet up the center here on each one of these, and then we need to attach them to the side of the fuselage. Now what I think I'm going to do is actually put these into place on the side of the fuselage and glue them in using the Clicos to hold it into place against the side form. And then once I get these glued into place, I can start working on the stiffeners. Now, while I'm working on that, what I decided to do is go back here and keep working on these phenolic blocks. Now what I did is I shaved down the one side of this block because these were actually 1/2 inch phenolic, and these need to be trimmed down to about 10 millimeters thick. So I did that on the inside, so that on the outside here, where the attachment of the control part that needs to go on the end of the tube gets riveted on and actually is going to ride on it, that I kept the shiny side out on these. So what I'm going to do is just, I haven't cut these yet to put the bolt in that's going to allow us to adjust and turn this into sort of a clamp that's going to go on the flight control tube that goes across the back of frame 4 here. So I'm just going to keep working on these, trimming these up, getting these final shaped, get them cut, and get the bolt in here that needs to be installed for adjustment. So I'm going to work on both the left and the right side here, and once I get those done and get the tube fit back in here, I'll show you what it looks like. So I kind of jumped ahead a little bit here and finished up these phenolic blocks, and all I did was went ahead and final cut the corners off and the edges off that were supposed to be cut. I also drilled the hole that is supposed to make the clamping mechanism here, and then I also cut the side here so that we could create that clamp and just have a little bit of a gap there. And then I went ahead and just bolted this all back together, put the tube in here, and the tube, it spins fairly easily. It's a little bit stiff. I don't even have these tightened up at all, but that's probably fine. We don't want, there should be somewhat of resistance on this, because that's what the flap lever that gets moved and put into the notches that we'll create here on the side for the flight control here is going to move, and so this can be fairly stiff. In fact, these just need to be tightened up a little bit, and that's probably where it needs to be. I did go ahead and slip these fittings that go on the ends. I had these machined for me. I went ahead and had somebody that had the capability of making these really nice parts on a very high-end CNC machine. So I went ahead and just fit these on the end here, and what I'm trying to do is just measure the length that this tube needs to be. These are supposed to fit snug against these phenolic blocks. Obviously the pipe on the end, or the tube on the end that comes out, should be flush with the end here. And then what I'll do is I'll slip this one on here until it is snug up against this phenolic block on the other side. And then I'm just going to use a piece of tape to mark the outside of this exactly where it needs to be cut. And then I'll go back when I take this apart and just measure that against the plans and just see how close I am. Now, chances are here, because I'm using thicker angle here on the side of the seat and on the other side of the seat here, I am going to probably be 40 thousandths wider on each end, so it's probably a total of about 80 thousandths. I don't think that's going to be an issue, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this where these fit. I'm assuming that once I get here with the flight control parts, it's all adjustable, so the fact that this is you know, 40 thousandths wider isn't going to make a bit of a difference that I can see. So I will go ahead and mark this, take this apart, and just trying to get this ready for final assembly. I got to figure out. I'm actually just using regular nuts on the back of here and not my lock nuts, so that I don't wear them out while I'm taking this apart and putting it back together. But this needs to be pop riveted onto this tube in these holes that are here. Pull this off. Oh, that won't come off that end because I got the tube sticking out. So this gets pop riveted onto the tube in these holes that are already pre-drilled into these fittings. But on the ends here, there's 3 holes here. There's a flight control fitting that attaches on this side, and then on the other side is just a control fitting that connects to the flaperons. And so what I have to figure out is at what point can I actually pop rivet this into place. Because once I pop rivet this in, it can't come off of these phenolic blocks. I can take the phenolic blocks out and take the whole assembly out and put it back in, but I won't be able to get the tube out from here once these are pop riveted on. And I don't really want to permanently install this until I've got the parts that attach to the ends of these fittings are actually made and probably installed. So I don't know how far I'm going to get with actually permanently installing this. I think I might just leave the temporary nuts on there for now. Go ahead and get the tube cut, and then I can put this back together, but I won't actually put my lock nuts on the back of here and pop rivet these on until I've got the remaining flight controls fit on either end. So I'm just going to keep working on this. I am going to try and get the seat done fairly quickly, because I do want to get the seat fit in here, get these brackets for the seat finished. And of course we still have to finish installing the frame 5 and actually gluing the stiffeners back here in here. I haven't done that yet. Part of the reason is I ran out of the AVEX pop rivets, and the California location of Aircraft Spruce is out of them, so I'm actually having them shipped from another store so that I can try and get those in here and get those finished. My goal is to finish the whole rear part of the fuselage here, so I'm going to consider this complete once I have this tube basically ready to be permanently installed. I'll have the seat done, we'll have all the stiffeners done here, and the frame 5 installed, and we'll really be at a point where it's really a matter of now going ahead and starting to work on the landing gear, because I think at this point, once this is done to this point, I want to go ahead and get this on the landing gear and get this to the point where I can then permanently attach the rear fuselage, which I don't want to do until after I have it on its wheels. So I'm gonna keep working on some things here, and I'll just keep showing you as I get each step done where I'm at. All right, I went ahead and cut the flap connect tube that goes under the seat. It ended up being about 1.5 millimeters longer than the plans indicate. Again, I don't believe it's going to be a problem, so I don't know that I'm going to worry about it right now. The alternative I have is that I could make these shims underneath here that I had to put in to equal the thickness of these side supports for the seat. I could make those smaller to the width that they should be, and then what I could do is notch out these phenolic blocks on the bottom so that it moved them inward slightly, and basically notch them around the additional thickness that is on these side rails. But again, I don't think it's going to be a problem for now, and we'll figure that out when we start connecting all of the flight control parts. If it is a problem, we'll just fix it, but for now it looks good. So I'm going to continue on working on a few other things here in the with the sides, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get the next step done. I'm now ready to start working on each one of the side parts of the rear half of the forward fuselage. And so this is frame 5. What I've done is I've just put this in here with the clecos just to hold it down, and I did drill all the way through my, my base frame here so that I could cleco this down through that frame and pull the side panel down exactly where it needs to be. So the curvature of this is correct right now, and what I'm thinking of doing here is actually gluing this down and holding it in there with the temporary sheet metal fasteners. And what I'm going to do then is actually start cutting and fitting all of the foam supports that need to go in between each one of these frames. So there's foam supports that have to go here. I think there's 3 here, 3 here, 3 here, 3 here. There are also 2 that go across the center here in the back. I'll deal with those later, but the goal is to get this side done and the other side done, and then finish the few things that are left on the bottom, such as the stiffeners here and also the seat pan. So I'm going to keep working on this. I'm just going to get this glued in and start cutting these stiffeners that need to go into place, fitting these in there so that I can glue the caps on those overnight. And then hopefully tomorrow the glue will be dry on this, and then I can go ahead and glue all of these stiffeners into place. And then I'll have this one side done, and then we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. So I've got all of the foam stiffeners on the right side of the fuselage cut and fit into place. I just have to cut the caps now to their approximate width or length, and then we'll go ahead and glue the caps on these, which we'll do outside of the fuselage. And then what I'm going to do is just glue frame 5 on here tonight. So I'll get this glued and I'll get the caps glued on these outside of the airplane. Then tomorrow I'll come back in and I'll final fit all of the foam stiffeners into place, and then go ahead and glue them in and just set some weights on top of them while it's in this form. But since I have some time left today before I'm going to leave, I'm going to go ahead and take the temporary sheet metal fasteners out of this frame 5. I am going to flip this over and go ahead and do the left side of the fuselage here and do the exact same thing. I'll go ahead and get all these stiffeners cut into place, and then that way tomorrow I'll be one step ahead of where I need to be, and I should be able to just start gluing things tomorrow. So let me get the other side set up to cut all those, get those fit into place, and then we'll start prepping things to glue. I was able to glue in frame 5 on the left side here and let it sit overnight. I just held it in with the Clecos temporarily, all the way held down to the supporting frame. And I also was able to glue all the caps onto all of the foam parts that I had already pre-cut and fit into place. So now that I have the caps on here, I'm going to go ahead and just final fit these into where they need to go. I'll go ahead and allodyne the strip that goes on top of here on all the parts and just prepare them for final gluing into place in between all these frames. So that's what I'm working on next. I'm going to try and just do one side at a time here. So I'm going to just start prepping these for gluing. I've finished the refitting process, just trimmed off the edges of these caps that were on there and just refit these all into place. I've got a pretty good fit on these now, so what I'm going to do is remove these one at a time. I'm going to go ahead and allodyne the cap on top and just set them aside, and then I'll go ahead and glue these all into place. And so it's the same procedures I've used with these other stiffeners. So I'll just go ahead and get these finished, glued into place, and I'll show you what it looks like when they're done. All right, so this is what the completed left side of the fuselage now looks like between frame 3 and frame 7 with all of the stiffeners installed. I was able to glue these in before I left yesterday and just left weights on them overnight to just keep it conformed to the shape of the side on the side form. And so I also did get the pop rivets in that I'd been waiting for, so I was able to final pop rivet all of the spots here around frame 5. And I also drilled on the outside here and installed all of the pop rivets down here on the outside of frame 5. So the left side here is basically complete at this point. So what I'm going to do today is do exactly the same thing, only do it on the right side over here. And we'll try and have that done by tomorrow. I've now got the stiffeners glued in place on both sides, both the left side over there and the right side. This all turned out really good. I was able to then reinstall temporarily frame 7. Now, frame 7 is really at the point now where it's ready to be glued into place. I haven't installed the pop rivets in the corners here on either side, and I haven't glued permanently in place frame 7. Now, frame 7 should be able to be glued in now and riveted on the outside skin here. The only thing I can't do is I can't rivet it across the bottom here until we install the rear fuselage. So I would have to glue this on the bottom with the temporary sheet metal fasteners, and then the rear skin will actually overlap the bottom skin on here. So I should be able to do the final installation on frame 7 at this point, which I think I am going to go ahead and do along with final riveting then these corners into place for frame 6. The outside of this is now basically where it's going to stay. It's not going to move at this point, so I think I'm going to go ahead and finish those final things. To finish up here on the forward part of the the rear part of the forward fuselage. So the other thing I did yesterday while I was waiting for the stiffeners to glue on this side is I started working on the seat pan. And of course, I've got two seat pans over here. The first one I did try and bend on the bending brake. Now, there's supposed to be a 6mm lip here, a 12mm bend then outside of that. And of course, there's no way for me to do the 6mm bend on my bending brake because it's just too small. You can't even get enough grip on the bending brake to be able to bend it. So I did use a piece of wood, an MDF edge that was radiused on the inside, and I pounded this edge down. But then I did try and go ahead and do the 12mm one here, this bend on my bending brake. I did a test bend, it worked. I thought, well, I'll just bend this, it should be fine. Of course, I bent this and it cracked. So I made another one. And I started doing the exact same thing. I went ahead and bent this 6mm lip over a piece of wood. Then I went to the bending brake and I went ahead and bent it at about 45 degrees here just so I could establish where that 12mm bend needed to go. And what I decided I'm going to do is create an MDF form that I'm just going to clamp this in between, and I will go ahead and pound this the rest of the way down. So the last 45 degrees to get this to 90 I will do with a wooden block. That way I will pretty much be ensured that I won't crack it. The rest of the bends here, I went ahead and did on the bending brake because as long as I'm not bending something 90 degrees, I don't have an issue with it cracking. It's really these 90-degree bends that are the problem. And I bent the tabs up on the end here. And all this came out pretty good. It does fit pretty well, so I'm pretty happy with that. In order to get these bends in the right place, what I did is I used the manual's recommendation. I think it was 65mm, and I think I did a little bit taller here. I did double check the length from the bottom of the seat to the top of the angles that are inside the fuselage here. So really it's this angle here, and I did a measurement by putting a ruler down to the bottom here, measured to the top to make sure that that bend was at a spot where the 12mm angle and the 6mm angle of 90 that goes across the top here would fit. And so I was able to establish where the location of that bend, and I went ahead and bent that at the correct angle. And then you do have to make sure that when you hit down here and come across that you get this bend started at the right place so that you get the material seated on the front angle here that supports the seat. And what I did for that was, let me go get this piece that I have over here. So what I did for that is I just took a scrap piece of aluminum that I had on the floor and just bent that to fit in here. I think I actually ended up messing with it a little more here. Let me just tweak this out a little bit. But anyway, trying to make sure that this would fit in here flat. And then I was able to, from this bend, determine the distance I needed to hit to do this bend on the seat pan to get it to conform properly to the angle and distance there that it should be. So I was able to do that properly. I was able to get the second bend in here, and I'm able to fit this pan in there now, and it does fit for the most part properly. The only issues I have is that these side angles here are inset a little bit, but you have to get around. You have to be able to get around these rivets that are here, the rivet heads on each side. It does fit down in here so that I can pop the top around the seatbelt, the seatbelt support. But I may have to just move those side angles out just a little bit so that they're, popping over maybe the top of these rivets so that it's more flush with this and that there's not a gap in between. And I can simply go back and just pound those side supports over just a little bit by reducing the radius a little. So I think I can fix that. I can go ahead and bend the back part here, and it does fit properly. So I'm pretty happy with the second seat pan here. I think this will work. This is going to just become material that I can use to cut smaller pieces out of, so it's not really going to go to waste. But what we do need to do here is the sides of these seat pan needs to be rolled to give a little bit of side leg support, and then it is recommended that we roll the front down just a little bit so that this edge isn't just a straight edge that catches behind your leg. So we're going to have to figure out how to do a couple larger radius rolling bends, and I haven't figured out exactly how I'm going to do that. I do have some pipe here that I might be able to bend this around. I'm not sure if I'm going to use an MDF form to do some of this, but the goal is to try and take basically from here out and roll a lip around there. So that's the only thing I have really left to do on the seat pan before it should fit into place. And like I said, other than finishing the seat, gluing in frame 7, and final riveting these corners, the forward fuselage structure will be basically done. And that's what I'm trying to get to, is basically have the structure of the forward fuselage finished, and then we can start doing all the fit out stuff that needs to be done, like the rudder pedal supports, or rudder pedal tray, some of the controls that need to be going in here. We need to finish, the controls here for the cross tube that supports the flap. We'll be doing the flap levers and all that kind of stuff. And of course, what I'm going to try and do as soon as I can is get the front landing gear done. So getting the nose gear installed, and then figuring out the main gear supports and getting the supports made and the gear leg and the wheels, tires, and brakes on here so that I can get this on its wheels. I don't want to attach the rear fuselage permanently until this is actually on its wheels. I think that's the best way to conserve the limited space I have in the workshop here. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to keep working on the seat pan for now and see if I can get the seat pan final fit in here so that we can get these angles installed, and also get the forward seat strap bracket that needs to be made and installed in here too. I do want to get that done as part of the seat. And like I said, we can pretty much get the frame 7 installed, and what I'm going to work on probably right after that is finish the cockpit border that goes between frame 2 here and frame 7. Once frame 7 is installed, I can go ahead and start making and bending that cockpit bracket, or cockpit support, because that's really the final piece, in addition to finishing these other things I've talked about to actually finish the forward fuselage. But I am going to save that to another video. I think that's going to be difficult enough that I'm going to go ahead and put that in a separate video after I finished the frame 7 and frame 6 and the seat pan here. Alright, so I got the basic shaping done on the seat pan here. I was able to curve the edges up a little bit, and I was able to put a small downward lip on the front edge. I might not say this is completely done yet. I might go back and do a little bit more bending, especially maybe pull these up a little bit more. It kind of depends on once I get it in here and sit in it and see if there needs to be a little bit more side support or not. But what I did to do this is I had a 2.5 inch diameter piece of aluminum that I was able to clamp at an angle here, basically centered on the corner here and going up to a line here. That's kind of indicated in the plans. I just kind of guessed a little bit. But I was able to clamp this and actually kind of roll it to roll the corners. And of course I used a rubber mallet and had that across the center of the lines here and just pounded this into shape to kind of curve it to the shape of this 2.5 inch piece of aluminum. And then what I did for the front lip here is I simply just put a piece of pipe that I had underneath it, similar to this, and then just use my rubber mallet to pound the edge down around that piece of, I think this is 7/8 steel that I just had in the shop here. So I've got the basic shape there. So what I can do now is, this now fits down in here. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. You do have to get it to pop down around the rivets. Then it has to go forward until it slides around the front of the seat belt bracket there. And you can see it slides into place, and I've got a really good fit. It's hitting my angles supports that are in here on either side. It's hitting the front supports that I have on here, and you can see I have a nice curve on the top of this, which is going to be nice. A little bit better when you're sitting in the airplane. Some CriCri pilots indicated that this edge, if you didn't round it, would tend to dig into the back of your leg when you're flying. So I think it's a good idea. It doesn't really show in the manual to round this edge, but it's a good idea to do that. And I'm also not hitting the screws here on these supports, the bearing block supports, which is good. So I mean, the basic fit is here. Until I sit in it, I won't really know if I need to do a little bit more of adjustments, because it's kind of a personal choice on how you want these edges rounded. It's not really a critical thing for flight. The only other thing I still have to do is this back edge here. I do have to continue that last 45 degrees to round that, or to bend that to 90 degrees from this edge here. I haven't done that yet, but what I'll do is I'll just take a piece of MDF and cut it down to that 12 millimeters so it fits behind there, and I'll clamp it and just use a rubber mallet to pound this down so it curves that edge a little bit more. But otherwise, the seat's looking pretty good. I think what I'm going to do also is go ahead and locate my holes for the nut plates that are behind here, and also get the nut plates installed and finish setting up these two brackets in the front so that I can permanently install those. And then what I'm also going to do at the same time is go ahead and get the seatbelt bracket mount that mounts to the front here for the seatbelt strap made and installed. And so we're getting pretty close to having the seat completed. I'm just going to start working on a few of these other things, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So I've decided right now to go ahead and permanently attach frame 7 to the forward fuselage. And the only thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to glue along here the forward skin on the side, on both sides, and I'm just going to install the 3/32 pop rivets that get installed along each side. Across the bottom here, I'm going to go ahead and glue the bottom skin to the bottom of frame 7, which is the way it should be, but I'm going to have to put temporary sheet metal fasteners back in here, and I'll just leave the 3/32 ones here while the glue dries. But that should basically complete the installation of frame 7 to the forward fuselage. When we go to attach the rear fuselage, we'll go ahead and, I believe we have to glue these angles in. We'll go ahead and glue the skin on the outside here and get this pop riveted together. And then we'll go ahead and final rivet through the bottom of the rear fuselage skin that overlaps the front fuselage skin and frame 7 here. And I do have to double check. I believe these get 1/8" rivets all the way across here. I'm almost certain. I was a little bit surprised that when I went back and looked at the drawings, is that the overlap part here between the forward fuselage and the rear fuselage on the side panels is actually only 3/32 rivets. So I'm only going to install these small 3/32 rivets there, but yeah, then I can let this sit overnight, and then what I should be able to do is come back and final drill out the corners of frame 6, and then I can get the 1/8" pop rivets that need to go into each one of these corners installed. So I'm gonna go ahead and mix up some glue and start pop riveting this together. So before I left the shop yesterday, I went ahead and glued in frame 7, and I installed the rivets down the side here on both the right and left side. And what I did, this actually worked out really well. I just put blue tape along the edge here and up the sides, and of course I sanded between the blue tape and the edge so that I could get a nice clean area where the glue was going to be applied for the flange here that attaches to the sides. And so once I cleaned that all up with Scotch-Brite, obviously I Scotch-Brited the ends of the frame 7 that was going to be glued also, I was able to just apply glue on the side skin, the bottom skin, and then go ahead and install frame 7, rivet it in place, and then pull all the tape off. And it gave me a nice clean edge here with no glue residue. Well, there's maybe a tiny bit over here in the corner, but otherwise it actually worked out really, really well doing that, and it was nice, clean, and quick, especially when you're trying to fit this in here because it's hitting everything and kind of making a bit of a mess when you're trying to put it in here. So that worked well. I've got that glued into place. I also installed the 3/32 pop rivets down the side here, and of course I made sure that I cleaned up all of the glue that was on the edge here and across the bottom here, so that I make sure I get a nice tight joint here with the rear fuselage skin when I eventually put that together. So this is now all glued into place. As I did mention before, I did have the clecos installed across the bottom here because obviously the lower skin has to overlap over the top of this skin, and then we pop rivet this together with the bottom skin of the rear fuselage when we put the rear fuselage permanently together with the forward fuselage. So what I'm going to do next now is I still haven't drilled out on frame 6. I'm sorry, I still haven't installed the rivets here on the frame 6 corner. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now that I have frame 7 all permanently installed into place. These are all drilled out to the 3/32 holes, so I just need to final drill those to the 1/8 inch holes and go ahead and install the pop rivets in those corners. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that next. And once that's done, I'm just gonna finish working on the seat. So I did a little bit more work here on fitting the seat pan in place. I actually got the holes drilled in the 4 corners here for the screws that need to hold it in. I'm still trying to figure out what to do with the screws that are supposed to go through these sides down here at the bottom. There's no way to get that lip to push against the side here when it's put in, because you got to go over the rivets here on both sides, and these don't flex at all. So there's no way to push this thing into place, especially fitting it in and out, where I can get these side parts to pull against the side. You can see there's a gap down here. So what I think I'm going to have to do is I'm assuming I'm supposed to drill a hole through here and put a nut plate on the other side so I can put a screw in here. I understand that, but I think between this lip here and the side panel, I'm going to put a washer in between there, because I don't want to screw this in and pull it against it. I'm not sure that that's a good way of doing it, and I think there still needs to be a gap in here no matter what, especially to pull the seat pan out. So that's what I'm going to do in that spot. Again, this isn't a flight worthy thing, so I don't think it really matters, but that's what I'm going to end up doing there. On the front here, I went ahead and cleaned up the supports here that are on top of frame 4 for the seat. I alodined them and I pop riveted the back side of those brackets into place. And what I'm trying to do is align everything here so I can drill the holes to put the screws in through the front of the seat into those brackets. But before I permanently attach these seat brackets to the front, I want to make sure that I make and install the seat belt bracket that's supposed to go it's supposed to mount through the holes of the forward part of these seat brackets with bolts. So what I've done is I've cut out the seat belt bracket here, and the seat belt bracket for the front is supposed to mount right across, let's see, right across here. So what I'm sorry, that's backwards. I'm going to flip it around the right way. So it's supposed to mount like so. And like, let's see if I can get this thing positioned right. It has to be bent up in the back. But anyway, so it's supposed to go essentially there. And what we're supposed to do is drill out the holes here on the front part of these seat supports to put a bolt through. And then we're supposed to drill out the 2 rivets that I've already installed underneath here in frame 4 and drill those out also. And then, put 4 bolts through this to attach it. This actually gets bent. I'm going to bend this up at 30 degrees so that when the seat belt comes through here, you're supposed to strap the seat belt onto this to create the lap belt, center part of the lap belt. So I want to try and get this installed next so that I can drill out these holes so that I can position these front supports in the right place, and then go ahead and drill out the holes here for the seat support and get the nut plates on the back there. This is kind of the last step I need to do. The only other thing I'm going to do with this seat is I do want to bevel this edge here. So I'm going to create a wooden form that I can actually bend this in a little bit so that I don't end up with a sharp edge on the seat there. So that's the only other thing I'm going to do with the seat pan at this point. But once I get all 6 of the screws in here, well actually it's 8, I guess it's 2 here, 1, 2, 3, 6, there's 8 screws that have to go in the seat pan that hold it in place. And I'm just trying to final fit drill and get the seat pan fit. And then I'm going to call this stage of the construction complete, so that we can start moving on to some of the flight control stuff and landing gear and some of those things. So let me go ahead and see if I can get this bent, get this alodined, and get the holes drilled out so that I can start fitting this into place so that I can finish up the seat supports. So I went ahead and bent this bracket in my vise using the same techniques I've used in the past for some of the thicker materials. Bent it at a 30-degree angle, and then I went ahead and drilled out to a number 8 bolt size for the mounting of this. Now what I did do is I put some washers underneath these 2 bolts in the middle because it's sitting on top of these support plates here on the ends, and it doesn't mention this in the manual, but obviously I think this should be at the same height. You don't want to bend this down and put extra pressure on in the middle of it. So I went ahead and just put some washers underneath there. and then I'll go ahead and put some nuts on the back. Now I'm going to use these reduced nuts, you know, the jet nuts basically for this. There's very tight tolerances behind here. In fact, when I drilled down through this one and this one, you actually hit the top, the rivet tail that sticks out on the top rivet for these side supports. So I believe the washer on this will actually fit just above the rivet, and then I should be able to fit this up in there, but it's going to be quite close, and I will not be getting a wrench on the back of this. I will have to screw it in from the top, which is fine. But like I said, just be careful that you don't get these holes too close to the spar, and that you stay a little bit further out towards the edge so you have enough room to get a nut on the back. The two center ones here look fine. There's plenty of room behind there, I believe. There's another rivet right behind this one too, almost. It's a little bit offset, but very, very tight behind there. So what I think I'm gonna do then is I'm gonna pull this off, and I'm going to go ahead and round the inside edge of this cutout here, because that's where the seat belt's going to wrap around and pull this direction, and I want to make sure I get a nice radius on that edge so we don't end up cutting the seat belt over time. And then I'm going to Aludyne this, and I'm going to bolt this probably permanently into position right now, so that'll allow me to go ahead and finish up the seat pan supports here and get the nut plates installed on there and get the holes drilled at the front of the seat pan. So yeah, let me go ahead and finish some of these things, and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. So I decided to do a modification here on my seat installation. One of the problems that I ran into is once I tried to put the screws that were supposed to go in the side of the seat that were supposed to mount to the side rails here, I realized that I couldn't put a nut plate there because this is only 20 thousandths material, and there's not enough thickness here to countersink for a nut plate. So what I decided to do is just make a doubler that fit over the top that not only got rid of the gap that I had between the side of the seat, but it also allowed me to put rivets through it to countersink the nut plate, the rivets for the nut plate. So this is what I basically made for both sides, and what I can do is just rivet this onto the side with an 1/8 inch rivet on each end, and then I can just drill out and countersink the rivets here for the nut plate, then that can go on the other side of this support here. So that's what I'm doing, and that's my fix essentially for being able to put a nut plate on the back of there and be able to fix that gap issue that I'm going to have just trying to get the seat past these rivets here. So I'm going to go ahead and install this one on the right side and then refit the seat back in here and make sure that I can get the screws into the side of the seat. And the seat then is basically done, other than trying to clean it up a little bit. So let me get this installed, I'll refit the seat, and we'll see what it looks like when I'm done. All right, so I'm just finishing up some of the odds and ends here on the forward fuselage. The thing that I had remaining on the seat pan to finish was the flange that needs to be put onto this opening here for the lap belt or the seat belt that goes through the center and attaches to the top of frame 4. So I just cut out some MDF forms. This is the form that I'm going to use to be a guide of where I want the outside of that bevel to be, and then I just cut out this, and I went over to my disc sander and just set it at a 45-degree angle and went ahead and just rounded off or chamfered the edge of that I can then fit this down into here. We'll clamp this on the other side, and I should be able to just pound this down and create that flange there. And once that's done, the seat pan should be pretty much finished. I might go back and see if I can round these just a little bit more. I've got a pretty good curve on there, but they probably should be rounded a tiny bit more. The other thing I'm trying to make sure is that the edge of this actually clears these clamp nuts that are on here for the cross tube that goes in here. So I might go back and, like I said, just round this off a little bit more with a pipe and a rubber mallet. So I'm going to go ahead and flange this. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done, and I'll go ahead and curve these a little bit more, and then when we're ready to put the seat back in there, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, I was able to knock that slight beveled edge into the seat belt hole. That turned out pretty good. And then I used a slightly smaller pipe and was able to round off the ends of the seat a little bit more. I think it looks pretty good. I was kind of trying to make sure I had a straight edge across here, and I got it pretty well. So I ended up using an 1.5-inch pipe to kind of run along here and bend this edge up. That seemed to be a pretty good diameter to get, you know, a decent curve on this. There's a lot of spring back, so if you try and use anything bigger like I started out with, you'll only get it to round off a certain amount. But if you run that pipe basically centered on this edge here across at an angle here, it rolls up pretty well with this, just pounding it around the edge of this. And then I just use a 7/8 inch pipe, you know, underneath the front here, and again just ran a rubber mallet across the front. That worked good. So I'm pretty happy with this. I think I'm just going to leave this alone for now. It's good enough. It fits. So I'm very pleased with all of that. It fits well in here now. And it's got kind of a multi-step procedure for putting it in. You got to put it in around the back, and then you got to slide it forward, and it snaps around the front. And anyway, it fits in there really nicely. So very happy with that. And at this point, I'm calling the forward fuselage basic construction complete. We're obviously got a lot of things to finish in here, and it's going to be a long time before this this forward fuselage is completely complete. But the next step that I'm obviously mentioned that I'm going to do is go ahead and do the cockpit edge. That's really the next thing that needs to be done. That goes from here, runs along here to frame 2, and it actually encapsulates then these frames that are sticking out the top here. And of course that's what you know, the canopy and everything else is going to have to mount to. So that's really the last step as part of the finishing of the structure of the forward fuselage, is really getting that cockpit combing piece on there. And I'm going to save that for a different video because we do have to shape that and fit that into place. And this video is getting way too long. So yeah, but this looks great. Very happy with this. I'll see you in the next video.